Aloha students, nice to see you today as always. Today's topic is the spread of Christianity as we are discussing what is the Roman Empire, no longer the Roman Republic, even though the aspects of the Roman Republic, the branches still exist. The Roman Republic, for all intents and purposes, no longer exists. And now we have the emperor, the first ever emperor named Augustus. Something very interesting happened late in Augustus's reign, late in Augustus's life, something that nobody really understood the significance of. This significant event at the end of the life of Augustus, this significant event, can you guess what it is? It has to do with this subject. Yes, it was the birth of one of the most famous human beings of all time, a man named Jesus Christ. Okay? So, Jesus Christ was born during the reign of Augustus. Isn't that fascinating? Okay, so here we go. Blank piece of paper, please. Why am I showing the Colosseum? Well, stick with me and you will find out. The Colosseum has an important story, an important part in the story of Christianity. All right, so here we go. We basically sort of say that Christianity comes from the Jewish religion. It's an offshoot, I'm going to call it. That term I'm going to use is offshoot. Basically what that means is it grows out of the Jewish faith. Many of the early people that you read about in the Old Testament were Jews. All right? We call the place where Christianity was founded, today we really call it Israel. That's where the city of Jerusalem is, and that's sort of where we sort of say that Christianity really came out of, even though Christ was born in Bethlehem. We call it it is known as Palestine as well, where Israel is. This is a general topic for that area. And then this term Judea was the name of this territory during the time of the Roman Empire. So when the Romans referred to this area, they referred to it as Judea. All right? Christianity obviously is named after this person, Jesus Christ. All right? And today I'm going to tell you some stuff that you probably already know. A lot of stuff that you probably already know about Christianity. But I'm going to throw some stuff in here that you probably don't know as well. All right? Here we go. We have this. This is what I just mentioned. That this person, Jesus Christ, was born during the reign of Augustus, the very first emperor, and then Jesus was put to death by the Romans during the reign of the second emperor, a guy named Tiberius. Tiberius was the adopted son of Augustus. So this is the same line, the same family. If you would like some dates, I'll just throw these in here. This is one of the curious things that students always sort of are mystified by. These are I think you're all aware that Jesus was a 33-year-old man when he died, when he was put to death. But we roughly, and again, these dates are all applied after the fact, retroactively. They didn't call it this during his life. But generally, you can come to close to saying that Jesus was born in about 8 BC, and he died in 25 AD. Now you're going to say, Mr. O'Brien, hold on a second. I thought BC means before Christ and AD means after death. Loosely, that's what they basically mean. They roughly mean the life of Christ after the ending of the life of Christ. So there's no 33 years of no years, and there's no year zero. So again, remember this is retroactively. We go downhill in the BCs and we go uphill in the 80s. All right, so let me just sort of go through about 7 items here that I think are critical to sort of remember at this time period. So as Christianity arises, as this man, Jesus Christ, sort of makes his appearance and starts to preach the word that he's talking about, one of the things that really sort of comes out of what he says is that we should all be humble, and we should all be giving, and we should all care about our fellow human beings. Now you may say, well, Mr. O'Brien, everybody knows that about Christianity. This is we attend this Christian school, we have Christian education, we know that. Okay, and I agree, you should know that. And my point is, however, why should this be brought up I'm basically making the argument that these virtues, if you will, these sort of concepts, these sort of thought processes, were not necessarily common in ancient history, in this Southern European, these civilizations, the Greeks and the Romans, who had a lot of influence in the Middle East, had a lot of influence in Northern Africa, were influenced by those places. But my point is that those three things up there, number one, were not necessarily the first things Greeks and Romans thought about. Okay, now you may say, well, what do you mean they didn't think about that? Well, let me put it to you this way. If you sort of think about who did the Greeks and the Romans look up to? Well, they looked up to their gods. Well, if you think about the Greek and the Roman gods, one of the things you should sort of keep in mind is that these Mount Olympus gods, if you will, they were not necessarily always super nice to humanity, to humans, were they? Much of the way that the polytheistic gods of the Greeks and eventually the Romans acted was in a selfish way. Okay, so if your gods who you look up to act this way, why should we expect people of these time periods to act this way? You should not necessarily expect that. Now here comes the Christian God, and what does he come along and how is he? Well, he's a forgiving guy. He promises a better life after death. What? Whoa, holy cow, that's certainly different than what ancient people were used to. And so and I would say this is maybe the critical thing of all, is life after death, a better life after death. Now, you have to sort of think about this. What was life like in ancient times for a lot of people? Well, it was tough. And that's putting it mildly. So let me ask you, what sort of people do you think in Roman times, in the Roman society, what type of people do you think may have been attracted to Christianity if this was a basis of Christianity? Well, I think you would be correct if you said, well, lower class people. And we remember that lower class people in ancient Rome were known as the plebeians. And so Christianity became the religion of the masses. They turned away from Jupiter. They turned away from Neptune and Pluto to the Christian God. But there's other groups. You might find this interesting. One of the groups that really loved Christianity was slaves. And again, this really makes sense, if you really think about it. This makes sense because certainly slaves were seeking, their life on earth was very, very difficult, very brutal. They're seeking a better life after death. There's another huge, massive group of people that also was attracted to Christianity, and even the Romans often referred to, can you think of this huge group of people? The Romans often referred to Christianity as the women's religion. Now again, what do these three groups of people have in common? Their lives were difficult. Their lives were much more difficult than men. And so therefore, they were attracted to Christianity, okay? Here are some other things that we would sort of say, well, yeah, we know that about Christianity, obviously. But again, if you think about ancient times, you should recall that these things were normal. Look, Christianity opposed suicide. Suicide was common in ancient times. I just told you the story of Antony and Cleopatra and Brutus and Cassius, 4 people, very famous people, that committed suicide. Why would people commit suicide in ancient times? Well, a lot of times because being put to death was often a gruesome, brutal thing. We talked about the Spartans, didn't we? And what the Spartans would do to newborns if they seemed to be unworthy or were misshapen, they would discard them. Christianity said that's bad. Adultery, while marriage was certainly an institution in ancient times, there was nothing really in there that said that you have to be loyal to your person that you're married to. You have to be monogamous, and that was no such thing as that. So adultery was very common. And then I guess I would say just crimes against your fellow man, your fellow human being. All right? Now, one of the things that really is sort of a big deal, and you say, okay, so these Christians did things differently. What was the big deal in Roman times? Well, in Roman times, what eventually started to happen is that the emperors started to demand that they be worshipped as virtual gods. This is being known as being divine. when you're divine, you are virtually a god. You may not be a god, but you are chosen by God. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt were seen as actual gods. The Roman emperors were not necessarily that way. They were more chosen by God. Okay? They were given godly characteristics. They're virtual gods. So Christians wouldn't go with it. Christians didn't do this. And I think you know this as well. What's the first commandment? Well, thou shalt not have a false god before me. So what is the real situation I'm trying to get at with you on this? And that is that Christianity literally became illegal. It was against the law to be a Christian. And really, this part right here is what got Christians into trouble with the law, if you will. And Roman emperors were terrified of the growth of the Christian faith, how many people became Christian. They understood that this was extremely popular with the slave population, with the plebeian population. And the Roman emperors were very scared of these numbers of people and the potential for a revolt. Now, there was never a Christian revolt in the Roman Empire, period. But that's something that the Romans were very concerned about. And to deal with it, here goes the importance, to try to deal with it, to try to squash it, the entirety of the Roman Empire, there is the story. There's lots of stories of the entirety of the Roman Empire, but what must be admitted is that during the period of the Roman Empire, brutal persecutions against Christians occurred. Now maybe you understand why I showed you the Colosseum, and that's sort of why I'm going to show you this scene from Gladiator later on today. So Christians had a choice. They knew they were breaking the law. They knew they would get in trouble. All right, so they had a choice. So when confronted, hey, Roman person, you're under arrest. Well, let me put it this way. Hey, Roman person, are you a Christian? Christians had two choices. Number one, they would say, no, I'm not a Christian, in the attempt to avoid getting in trouble. Well, therefore, where would they practice their religion? Well, they had to do it in secret. They had to do it in hiding. Have you ever heard of the Underground Railroad during the American Civil War period? It was basically a system to help slaves in the southern states escape to the northern states. Now, was that literally an underground railroad? Was there a tunnel dug underneath the border of Maryland and Virginia where they laid tracks and built a tunnel and a train literally drove through there? Was it really an underground railroad? Well, no, it wasn't. The term underground implies secret. Now, where does that come from? Maybe a secret in other time periods you hear of secret newspapers, an underground newspaper. Did they really make them those newspapers underground? No, but the term comes from this time period, and you can see I put quotation marks here, in which literally Christians went underground. Now, what do I mean by this? And I think you'll find this part of the story very fascinating. This may be something that you have not heard of. The aspect of being underground was something called the Catacombs of Rome. All right, now what is a catacomb? A catacomb is some sort of underground place, some sort of area that's hidden, that's down deep. Okay, and the Catacombs of Rome were literally dug out tunnels below the city. And these are in Rome, the city of Rome themselves, and other places in the Christian Roman world where Christians obviously were, they did this as well. But the most intricate system of tunnels is in ancient, underneath the city of Rome itself. And I have toured these, and this is from a book. These are not my pictures, but this is exactly how I recall it to be. Steep stairway that went down pretty deep. And then when we got down there, the single file tunnels where you would walk through there, where it's just literally dug into the dirt and dug into the rock, these tunnels. And there didn't seem to be too many places where there's wide open space. They're mostly just tunnels. All right. Now, as you're looking at these, they're pretty intense, and they're to a degree, I'd say, pretty spooky. But maybe the main thing you're asking, and you see in every one of these, is were these indentations in the wall? See these? I mean, what the heck are these, Mr. O'Brien? What are these indentations in the wall? Well, let me tell you what they are. The Roman people, and really generally ancient people, cremated their dead bodies. Christians said, we're not doing that. Christians said, we are going to bury our bodies. But they couldn't bury their bodies because that would give away their location or their way of doing things to the Roman authorities. So not only did they have to practice in secret, they had to hide their dead because they were not going to cremate them. And so these indentations, what you sort of have to imagine is, during that time period, all of these being filled with dead bodies. Now you may say, well, that must have really smelled bad. Well, it may have, but most of these are going virtually all of these are going to be wrapped up in some way, shape, form, or fashion to prevent the smell. Okay, so I would also say, now this is a picture, but I did see sort of rooms like this. So some patricians, some of the wealthy class people in ancient Rome did also convert to Christianity, and they had the money to make sort of a room off to the side of a catacomb, of a hallway, a little bit nicer, where their people were buried, and it seemed to be a little bit more effort, just nicer. Okay? All right, so that again, you had two choices. One choice was to say, are you a Christian? One choice was to say no. The second choice was to say yes. Yes, I am a Christian. And you said that knowing very well that if you did say that, you were going to get in trouble. And so what we call these folks is we call them martyrs. All right? Now, this may be a term you're familiar with. A martyr is somebody who willingly admits what they are and is willing to die for their beliefs. And of course, Jesus himself is the best example of this, of somebody who was a martyr. All right? So those are the two choices. Yeah. Are you a Christian? No. Okay, you practice in secret. Yes, I admit who I am. You're under arrest. These are the role models of ancient Christians. Okay, so I want to say a couple other things about Christianity. Let me continue just for a few more moments here. Let me make 3 more points. What are some other things that happen that Christianity brings that we sort of think about in modern times? Well, I would say the concept of free will. All right? The commandments are not, sometimes people say, well, the commandments is that like law? Is that like codified law, like we would think of, like breaking the law? Not exactly, but you certainly could break a commandment, but it wasn't the same sort of concept as breaking the law. The idea of free will, Christianity basically says, we want you to avoid doing these things. And here's 10 things you should probably try to avoid doing. Now, just so you know, if you avoid doing those 10 things, you're going to be in good standing. If you break any of these 10 things, if you do any of these 10 things that we say not to do, there's going to be consequences for that. But we're going to let you, the individual, choose. There's an element of free will here. Christianity is not like law. Christianity is the idea, yes, the God commands you, but you have free will. You will be rewarded or punished based on your exercise of free will. I would also say one of the most important things about Christianity that is often lost in our modern day political discussions is this is an early attempt and really sort of the first attack that helps people have equal rights. Why does it do that? Because what does the Christian God say? The Christian God says that everyone is equal in my eyes. So what I'm getting at here is, if you really think about this, this is the first real attack on the aspects of how poorly women were treated in ancient times. Because women are equal in the eyes of God. So here is a moment where I think that this is a great moment for women. The invention or the creation, or however you want to put it, the introduction of Christianity was a great moment in history for the rights of women. Now, this is debated today. Many people say this interesting debate sometimes is flipped in modern times because of the abortion issue. And many people say, well, anybody who is against abortion is against women. And of course, what is a major institution that's against abortion? Well, any Christian church. Because they would argue that unborn child is equal in God's eyes. Okay, so that's your debate. My point is that at one time, there was no disputing the fact that Christianity was certainly on women's side. I would also say this is an early argument against slavery. Slavery was just sort of, it was really just sort of natural and understood and accepted in ancient times. But here we have an institution that comes along and says, no, slavery is wrong. The enslavement of people is not only immoral and terrible and cruel, it's against the kinds of thoughts that God has about all humans. So that's something else I would keep in mind. I would also say we discussed the concept of natural rights when we talk about the rise of Christianity. And this is this concept of where do your rights come from? The rights that you have, where do they come from? Do they come from God or do they come from man? And of course, this is this debate that we have today about equality, isn't it? Those who are of the believers of equal opportunities, that you're equal at the beginning, believe in this concept of natural rights, that your rights are inherent and natural and come from the Creator. The other side of that argument is the idea of equal outcomes. In other words, we're all equal at the end. And who's got to do that? Well, man has got to come along and write laws and create governments that can implement policies that will make sure that everybody is equal. Okay, so I wanted to once again share with you the pictures of the Colosseum because it became a place where Christians were persecuted. This is a place where imprisoned Christians were taken to be put to death. And again, I've commented to you about this building, the greatness of this building. This building is an incredible accomplishment. It demonstrates everything that is great about ancient Rome, but it's a paradox because it also demonstrates everything that was wrong with ancient Rome. Because what is the specific purpose of this building? The purpose of this building was death as a spectator sport. All right? And one of the groups of people that was put to death in the Colosseum were Christians. Christians were literally fed to the lions. All right? They were brought there and they were basically hungry. Lions were released up into the floor of the Colosseum after a bunch of Christians were put up in there, and they just let them, and people watched these lions devour and kill people. This gives you some people up here on the balconies. You can see how big this building is. Here is a picture of the inside. Again, if you recall, this is the floor level, so you have to imagine the floor here covering this whole sort of rounded area, and then they had a wall around the outside. This area in here underneath the floor is called the hypogeum. You can see some people down here to give you some scale. This was like locker rooms, for lack of a better way of putting it, and jail cells and cages for animals, and there was a series of trapdoors, etc. Okay, but one of the things I want to really sort of point out here is if you take a look over here, what do you sort of see? Let's sort of zoom in on this. If you take a look right there, check that out. There is actually a cross that has been placed on the inside of the Colosseum. What the heck is a cross doing there? Well, it wasn't obviously built, placed there when the Colosseum was being built. The cross was put there as a memorial to all of the Christians who died on the floor of the arena. And several years ago, some students from our school went to Rome on a spring break trip, a school trip, and I said, hey, make sure you get a picture of yourself in front of the cross in the Colosseum. These students did that, and this is the one they brought back to me, all right? So again, Christianity, part of the story of Christianity is in the Colosseum. And let me just say that the illegality of Christianity is the thing you should keep in mind. Christianity was illegal. And that is something very important to remember. It will get legalized, and that will be the next story I will tell you. But as of right now, we should keep in mind that Christianity is illegal. All right, everyone? Okay, thank you very much. We will see you next time.